during their 9 months in space. Having had the capacity to leave the
we will be hearing from core probably around 2:20-ish. As you can see on your screen right now, Nick, Sunny, Butch, and Alexander are using their screens to keep tabs on the burn duration, the Draco firings, and trajectory details such as entry angle, spacecraft perigee, and how much distance remains until deorbit burn termination. As I mentioned earlier, Dragon is flying itself. So all the crew has to do is stay strapped into their seats and keep tabs on things. Although I must say, if I had one of those window seats, it would be pretty difficult to restrain myself. Now, with Nick, Sunny, Butch, and Alexander ready to deorbit and splash down back on Earth, they will be heading to one of 8 targeted sites supported by SpaceX and NASA. All of these sites are located off the coast of Florida, either in the Gulf of America or the Atlantic Ocean. Spreading the supported sites across multiple locations helps maximize the return opportunities for this mission and future crews, lowering the chance that we'll have to wave off due to bad weather. For those of you following along, you'll know that today's splashdown marks our final Dragon recovery on the East Coast. After 6 great years of successful recovery operations off the East Coast, we'll be moving all Dragon recovery operations back to the West Coast.
And as always, NASA and SpaceX jointly select our splashdown location. And for today, the prime recovery site is off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida. The selection process works with a lot of different variables, including the space station's orbital trajectory or path that it follows, what landing sites are available and have favorable weather, how much free flight capability Dragon has for the trip home, and the sleep schedules for the returning crew members, as well as, of course, the big one, the weather.
We'll start with calculating daily return options based off of the space station's current orbit and Dragon's capabilities to maneuver and line up for re-entry. The time from undock to landing at the primary site can vary from less than 6 hours to more than 39. Getting home the quickest comes with some obvious benefits, but we always have to make sure the crew is properly rested for dynamic operations, preventing us from scheduling 20-plus hour days for them, of course. Trajectory and ballistic experts provide the daily opportunities that would line up Dragon with the 7 landing zones and split them into what we call ascending and descending opportunities.
Dragon uses its Draco thrusters after leaving station to execute a series of altitude-lowering maneuvers and to line up with the selected primary site. It can also change to different alternative sites while in a free flight if sudden weather moves in that we may need to avoid. So, as we mentioned, weather is something we're constantly looking at, making the final call to proceed about 2.5 hours before the crew undocks. So, for the Crew 9 return, we looked at a number of weather items. Some of the obvious ones are no rain or a chance of lightning in the recovery zone, both for the safety of the crew inside Dragon and the recovery teams in the water. And we're also looking for wind speeds to be less than 15 feet per second or about 10 miles per hour, and relatively calm seas so that we can safely execute recovery operations, which includes landing a helicopter on the recovery ship to fly Nick, Sunny, Butch, and Alexander back to Florida. Once Dragon began flying today, we had a number of additional checkpoints to either proceed towards the primary site, head to the alternate, or select a new zone based on real-time weather data. These checks happened all the way up until we were in the final hours before the deorbit burn, which has just about a minute or so left in it. And this is the last burn in the trip home that commits Dragon to re-entering the Earth's atmosphere.
Now, we are currently waiting to conclude the deorbit burn. We've got less than a minute until that finishes. We will expect to hear a call out for nominal burn, which will confirm completion of that deorbit burn for Dragon Freedom. We can see images there from the touchscreen display panels that the crew utilizes in flight. We can see the visualization of exactly which one of the 4 forward Draco thrusters are firing. That's why you have kind of like a strobe effect there.
And if you're just joining us, you are looking at live views of the Dragon Freedom. On your left is Commander of Crew 9, Nick Hague. To his right is Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Grabenkin. And also in Gorbanov, excuse me, that is Alexander Gorbanov. And then also in the capsule today is NASA astronauts Sunny Williams and Butch Wilmore. We're awaiting confirmation that their deorbit burn is complete, which is the last burn that's going to help set them up on a trajectory to splash down off the coast of Florida.
Deorbit burn complete. Performance nominal. Nose cone closure initiated.
Freedom copies.
All right, excellent news there. We heard the words we were looking for, nominal burn. So that means that that deorbit burn was successful and nominal, meaning as expected. And we're now beginning to close the nose cone in preparation for atmospheric reentry.
So in the background, Dragon is currently inhibiting those forward bulkhead Draco thrusters that we just used to complete the deorbit burn, ensuring it's safe to latch the nose cone shut for reentry. Also, the vehicle has initiated the nitrox suit purge, which will help keep Nick, Sunny, Butch, and Alexander cool and comfortable during reentry, which is coming up in about 20 minutes from now. At this point, the nose cone is closing and protecting the forward hatch for reentry, and the crew are using their screens to continue to monitor the locking of the nose cone, which is done by a set of hooks. And as we mentioned earlier, that nose cone has remained open since September, so this is the first time it's closing in a few months.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Now, we will be expecting, as I mentioned before, an entry brief from SpaceX Core. Again, that's the crew operations resource engineer who is seated in that room that you see there on your screen. That entry brief will provide updated times for anticipated splashdown as well as the loss of signal or period of LOS. That briefing will also give us information such as wind speed and wave height at the expected splashdown location. But all in all, everything has been great today. All events have been executed on time as expected, and we are looking forward to a splashdown of the Crew 9 crew at about 5:57 p.m. Eastern Time or 2:57 p.m. Pacific Time. Between now and then, things are going to start moving quite quickly. In fact, if anything, this will have seemed like the slower part of the reentry phase. We're going to go through, like I said, that period of loss of signal or LOS. That period is a few minutes long where we are unable to communicate or command the capsule due to the plasma that builds up on the exterior of the capsule. That period, like I said, lasts for a couple minutes. You will start to hear SpaceX Core hail the Crew 9 crew a little bit earlier than expected because we, in the past, have actually regained communications a couple minutes earlier than initially anticipated. So we'll go through that period of loss of signal, that entry period, that specifically when the Dragon spacecraft is re-entering through the atmosphere. Approximately at about 18,000 feet when the capsule is traveling at 350 miles per hour. We will see our first views of parachutes for the day. It's one of my favorite moments of return sequences is when we get to see the drogue parachutes. We'll see the drogues come out. Those drogues will help slow the vehicle down to about 119 miles per hour. And then that is when the main parachutes will come out from the Dragon spacecraft and then ultimately end in splashdown.
And we are hearing confirmation that the nose cone is closed and everything was nominal or as expected with that closure. So as we begin the second half of entry, Dragon is now beginning to inject cooled nitrox into the air being delivered to the spacesuits worn by Nick, Sunny, Butch, and Alexander. Again, this is what will allow the crew to remain comfortable while external temperatures reach 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit as they re-enter the Earth's atmosphere. atmosphere. So the heat shield is pointing forward, leading Dragon to the landing site.
Yeah. Now, speaking of the heat shield, Dragon's primary heat shield is comprised of PICA 3.0, which stands for Phenolic Impregnated Carbon Ablator. The first-gen PICA was initially developed by NASA for studying and sampling comets within our solar system.
SpaceX partnered with NASA to develop PICA-X, which was the second-generation product used on all Dragon 1 cargo resupply service missions that resupplied the International Space Station on 20 missions. PICA 3.0 was developed specifically for use on Dragon 2 crew and cargo with enhanced structural and thermal capabilities that allowed the heat shield to be even more effective in the way that it utilized the ability to make that heat ablate as it goes through the Earth's atmosphere.
The remainder of Dragon is composed primarily of a SpaceX proprietary ablative material. It's another class of thermal protection which is lighter weight versus PICA and protects the underlying composite structure during reentry to ensure the structural capabilities are maintained.
While Dragon will experience temperatures well over 3,000 degrees during peak reentry conditions, the characteristics of the thermal protection system coupled with the environmental control and life support system in the pressurized interior will ensure that Nick, Sunny, Butch, and Alexander stay cool and comfortable during all phases of reentry through splashdown.
Now, if you've just recently joined us, we hope to regain views of our crew members inside Dragon Freedom, but we don't have those available at the moment due to ground station coverage. So we will bring those back to you as soon as we can. Now, after Dragon Freedom has re-entered the Earth's atmosphere, a series of parachutes will deploy to slow the crew's descent. First will be the 2 drogue parachutes, followed by the 4 main parachutes, and those will guide Dragon to its first contact with Earth since it launched back in September. Dragon will automatically deploy these parachutes when different pressure and positioning sensors on the spacecraft detect that they're at the right speed and altitude.
Vehicle velocity at drogue deploy is approximately 350 miles per hour, and they deploy at about 18,000 feet. Now, when the vehicle velocity at main deploy is approximately 119 miles per hour, and they deploy at about 6,500 feet. When Dragon splashes down in the water, the vehicle velocity will be about 16 miles per hour, so you can really see how those parachutes help to slow down the crew inside the capsule. The highest G-load the crew is expected to experience today is about 3 to 5 Gs.
Yeah, when you think about really fun roller coasters, they're about in that range. So I'm sure that our crew on board will be well equipped to experience those Gs. It's nothing for them. They go through much more intense training.
And so we are continuing to make our way through a number of milestones today. We did have trunk separation.
Freedom, SpaceX. Nose cone is secure for entry.
Freedom copies.
All right, great news there. That tells us that the final physical configuration change for Dragon is complete. We have closed that nose cone. This is the last physical change that Dragon undergoes prior to re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. It's important that that nose cone is completely closed because underneath it is not only where the 4 forward Draco thrusters are located, but it's also because that is where the forward hatch is located. That is the hatch that is utilized for the crew to ingress and egress from the station while it is docked on board. And since our capsules are flight proven and we reuse them on future space flights, we want to make sure that all of the integrity of that hardware remains intact. So that nose cone is successfully closed, and we're going to start moving pretty quickly here. As I mentioned before, we'll go through loss of signal, we'll get that signal back several minutes later, and then we'll see the parachute action.
Yep, and then that's all ahead of splashdown off the coast of Florida. We're targeting Tallahassee as our splashdown zone today at 2:57 p.m. Pacific time this afternoon. Now, you did mention the call to the crew. They'll do some additional calculations following that burn and potentially let us know if that splashdown time has changed at all. But right now, we are continuing to target 2:57 p.m. And you can see there on your screen a path of where Dragon will be re-entering today. So if you are in the southern tip of Mexico, you might have the opportunity to see Dragon. Because it's a daytime splashdown, you probably won't have too great of views, but potentially you'll have the opportunity to get a glimpse of it there.
Once again, Dragon operators, they're monitoring the progress of Dragon through this re-entry phase. That is SpaceX Mission Control, located here in Hawthorne, California. That is also where the crew operations and resource engineer is seated. That person is the voice that we have heard multiple times and will continue to hear as the primary point of contact to the crew on board Dragon Freedom. We will also hear the voice of Commander Nick Hague. Basically, after we hear the Corps communicate something, we will hear Nick Hague indicate that they copy, that they heard the message well, some sort of recognition that the message was received.
And if you joined us yesterday for our coverage during the undocking, we were communicating through something that's called a big loop. We do that when we're in integrated operations with the International
Freedom, SpaceX, for entry sequence. Report when ready to copy.
Ready to copy.
All right, I've got some updated times for you. Our comm blackout start time is 2144. Our comm blackout end time is 2151, and our splashdown time is the same per your displays, 2157.
Okay. Understand comm blackout start 2144, stop 2151, splashdown per display.
That's a good readback. And with that, please report when tablets are secured behind the elastic bands, restraints are tight, and visors are down.
And copy, Wilco.
And with that communication from the Corps or Crew Operations Resource Engineer here in Hawthorne to Commander Nick Hague of Crew Dragon Freedom, we did hear that the loss of signal period is still at 2:44 p.m. Pacific, but we had a 1-minute adjustment to the acquisition of signal. That's going to now be at 2:51 p.m. Pacific time. However, our splashdown time remains the same at 2:57 p.m. Pacific time this afternoon off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida.
So all good news there as Dragon continues to make its way home with the Crew 9 crew. As we've mentioned before, we are splashing down on the Gulf Coast. We have ability to splash down on either side of Florida, but the location site just outside of Tallahassee, Florida is the site that was selected today due to best recovery conditions. And as Sandra mentioned before, weather is always a watch item, but everything is looking great for that particular recovery location. So I'm sure once we start getting views from the recovery vessel, I have a feeling it's going to be a pretty beautiful afternoon.
And we did mention that, of course, this is a daylight splashdown, so we should be getting some great views. We do have a couple of spacecraft called the WB-57, which are high-altitude planes that NASA utilizes during splashdown operations. Those are en route and going to be tracking the capsule as it makes its way through the atmosphere and should be providing some good views for us. Kate and I were just chatting about how we haven't had a daytime splashdown in a little while, so we're looking forward to the views along with you.
Yeah. Nighttime views are also great because we can see that capsule streaking through the night sky quite brightly. So like Sandra, you said earlier, daylight will be a little bit less bright, but we will definitely be able to see the SpaceX recovery team operations much clearer. I could also imagine it's probably a little bit easier for the team themselves to do their work in daytime than at nighttime. We'll see them rush in really quickly with a couple of fast boats as they begin the initial safety checks and sweeps of the Dragon capsule, while also retrieving the parachutes from the surface of the ocean. The recovery vessel, the main recovery vessel, will continue to make its way closer to the Dragon capsule. It is stationed a couple miles away from the actual recovery location, the splashdown location, for obvious safety purposes. So it takes a little while for that vessel to make its way over, but once it's closer, we'll have even better views of those recovery operations.
And you may be wondering why sometimes we splash down in the daytime versus the nighttime. And believe me, we would all love for these operations to happen during regular daytime working hours. But unfortunately, orbital mechanics just doesn't quite work out that way. So it has to deal with the location of the International Space Station, as well as where the splashdown zone is on Earth and that trajectory, as well as the phasing. So as we mentioned earlier, sometimes we have phasing as short as 6 hours, sometimes in excess of 30+ hours. It just depends on where the targeted area is that the capsule is going to splash down. So today's phasing has been 17 hours since undocking occurred at 10:05 p.m. Pacific yesterday evening for us here in Hawthorne. Early wee hours for folks on the East Coast and other areas of the United States.
Yeah, but regardless of whether it's daytime or nighttime, the SpaceX recovery team has trained and practiced and rehearsed for it all. So regardless of daylight, they are really efficient with those operations. And but like you said, Sandra, it has been a minute since we have seen a daytime splashdown on a NASA SpaceX crew mission. The last daytime recovery was on Crew 4, which was the debut flight for the capsule flying today, the spacecraft known as Dragon Freedom. And so, yeah, kind of a fun fact there in terms of the timing of that daylight splashdowns. Once again, standing by for more communication with the crew. The next event that we have coming up is the start of that period known as loss of signal. That is the period still expected at 2:44 p.m. Pacific time. This lasts for several minutes while the capsule is making its way through the Earth's atmosphere. The heat shield located at the bottom of the capsule, really doing all the work at that point in time in terms of using the atmosphere, parachutes. Now the heat shield is continuing to work to slow the vehicle down. That entry period, the Dragon spacecraft went from orbital velocity about 17,500 miles per hour down to about 350 miles per hour. So that really gives you a sense of why that plasma builds up on the exterior of the capsule, thanks to the heat shield and the work that it does. Those drogue parachutes will slow it down from 350 to about 119 miles per hour. We can see
15 kilometers. Brace for drogue window.
We can see seat rotation happening inside the capsule. Great to get those first views of our crew members. Once again, the capsules are going about 350 miles per hour when the drogues are deployed. Those drogue parachutes that we manufacture here in-house are going to slow the spacecraft down to 119 miles per hour. And that is when we will see the main parachutes deploy, and that occurs about 6,000 feet above the ocean's surface.
And we are expecting drogue deployment at 2:53 p.m. Pacific, so we should see it any second now. And there you are getting a great view of Crew 9 inside Dragon Freedom as it returns back to Earth. We are awaiting the drogue deploys. This view coming from the WB-57 high altitude plane. And there you see it on your screen, drogue deployment.
Drogue descent rate nominal.
You can hear the crowd here.
Visual on 2 healthy drogues.
crowd here very excited as Dragon Freedom continues to make its way back to planet Earth.
Next up, we'll stand by for the main deployment of the parachutes. The mains are quite a bit larger. You'll be able to notice the difference on your screen once they deploy, and they continue to ensure that the Dragon spacecraft slows down even further. As we mentioned, Freedom will be traveling 16 miles per hour when it splashes down off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida, here at 2:57 p.m. Pacific time this afternoon. And there we go.
We have visual on 4 healthy mains.
That view was from inside.
Freedom copy.
That view was from inside one of the buckets where the parachutes are located. So we see a great view there of the reefing on those parachutes. And as those main parachutes begin to inflate fully, 4 beautiful, healthy mains. Now awaiting visuals of splashdown.
Next Freedom, 1,000.
We'll start to hear Commander Nick Hague.
Copy, 1,000.
As we heard right there, Commander Nick Hague will be calling out the altitude of the Dragon capsule from here on out. Landing in water is simpler and provides more margin against unlikely parachute issues. You can see those parachutes continuing to slow the Dragon capsule down.
And if you're just joining us, you're looking at
800 meters.
a live view of Crew 9, just minutes away from splashing down off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida. Splashdown 2 minutes from now at 2:57 p.m. Pacific. We do have 4 healthy mains really doing the job there. Just breathtaking views of a calm, glass-like ocean off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida. Crew 9 just minutes away from splashing down.
This is really such an incredible shot. That
Copy,
was
600.
That was a live view from our recovery vessel, Megan, which is stationed a couple miles away from the splashdown site. We can see the crew there using their restraints as resting places for their arms. They were just in space moments ago, so their arms were able to float freely.
400 meters.
This is a gorgeous bluebird day here that we have for the splashdown of Crew 9. It's incredible to think that the Dragon capsule just minutes ago was going over 17,000 miles per hour, and now gently coasting to a soft splashdown.
200.
Copy, 200 meters. Brace for splashdown.
As you can see there on your screen, continuing to monitor progress of the Dragon spacecraft. And we're going to stand by for splashdown located in the Gulf of America off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida.
And splashdown. Crew 9 back on Earth.
And SpaceX Freedom, splashdown. Good main release.
Copy, splashdown. We see main chutes cut. Nick, Alex, Butch, Sunny, on behalf of SpaceX, welcome home.
It is an amazing, what a ride. I see a capsule full of grins ear to ear.
And as you can see on your screen, we have visual confirmation of splashdown. Dragon Freedom has returned home, and NASA astronauts.
System safety verifications are in progress. We'll report back when recovery personnel are en route.
Understand. And we're in section 2, 4.800 landing response. And looking for your word on if it is necessary.
In the distance, we can see the recovery vessel making its way.
Copy, you're in section 2 for the environmental assessment in 4.800. That is not necessary today.
Understand. Raising button.
So we will continue to have communications between the Corps and Nick Hague, the
Go thruster nozzles or outlets. The hyper
rigging, which you see happening right now on your screen. This is when a SpaceX recovery personnel actually works to climb aboard the capsule and work through procedures ahead of lifting onto the nest of the recovery vessel Megan. We heard it's going to be about 25 minutes or so until that lift actually takes place.
Okay, Freedom, the next call will be from the SpaceX flight surgeon on Dragon to Ground Private.
Understand. Thank you.
callouts there indicating that the crew will have the opportunity to do a quick check-in with the SpaceX flight surgeon. This is standard procedure for every Dragon spacecraft when it returns to Earth. It's just an initial check-in, make sure everybody is doing okay. They will also have another check-in with the flight surgeon once they are on board that recovery vessel that you see there in the background. We can now see that SpaceX recovery team member they're on top of the Dragon spacecraft. They are going to be working to install plugs in the Draco thrusters to ensure that none of those, and to ensure that no more hypergolic fumes or vapors come out from the spacecraft. They'll also place harnessing around the spacecraft that are required in order to lift it out of the water. Go ahead, Sandra.
Continuing to get some views of the recovery personnel, both the main recovery vessel Megan, as well as some of those fast boats that we've discussed previously. It looks like just a beautiful day there out off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida. Weather was pristine. We were able to get undocked from the International Space Station as expected at 10:05 p.m. Pacific time yesterday evening, and Crew Dragon has since completed steps ahead of its splashdown at 2:57 p.m. Pacific, and we're now stepping through procedures to get Dragon hoisted up onto the Megan recovery vessel and get the crew extracted out of the spacecraft. It will take us less than an hour to raise Dragon to the recovery boat and remove the crew from the spacecraft. After medical checkouts, the crew will return to land within 4 hours by helicopter. And if no additional medical assistance is needed, the crew will board a waiting NASA plane and depart for Houston. And as we continue to await Dragon to be hoisted up onto the ship, we have a very special treat. NASA Public Affairs Officer Jaden Jennings, who is actually on the recovery vessel and had a bird's eye view of the splashdown today. Jaden, how are you? How was the view from the recovery vessel?
Hi, Sandra. How do you hear me?
I've got you loud and clear, Jaden. It's so great to hear you.
Awesome. So splashdown, Sandra, was nothing
Freedom,
short of
be advised.
spectacular.
We are transitioning the forward link. Comm will be unavailable for approximately 5 minutes.
Freedom comes.
Thanks so much, Jaden. We did just have some communications letting us know that we'll have about a 5-minute period where we won't be able to hear from the crew. So please go ahead, tell us, how was the view from the recovery vessel?
Absolutely. Yeah, I was mentioning earlier, splashdown was nothing short of spectacular. And we were stationed about 1.5 nautical miles away from the splashdown zone and had great visuals here on the recovery vessel Megan. We actually saw a little of the smoke trail as the spacecraft was coming in, and then moments later we spotted those drogue chutes, and this was quickly followed by 4 healthy white and orange main parachutes. We then tracked Dragon all the way down as it slowly propelled into the ocean. And I think I speak for all of us on the ship when I say a new core memory was made today, and we are looking forward to having Crew 9 on board with us a little later.
Jaden, that is amazing. Now, obviously, we are watching it here on camera, and the landing conditions look pretty good, but how was it from your perspective? What is the sea state out there?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we've had optimal conditions for splashdown, and today it is sunny and 63 degrees outside right now with clear skies, light winds, and calm seas. The sea looks absolutely beautiful right now, and light blue with the sun reflecting from it. And, Kay, I think the crew's going to like what they feel weather-wise on this picture-perfect day for splashdown off the coast of Tallahassee.
Thanks so much, Jaden. It certainly looks like a beautiful day. Can you tell us a little bit about the journey of the recovery forces to get to this point?
Sure. So one unique aspect of this recovery was the onboard training on station conducted for Butch and Sunny to ensure they were ready to return on a Dragon spacecraft. That training covered all aspects of their return, including nominal and contingency departures, the orbit burn, splashdown, and post-landing ops, which is what this team is preparing for now.
Isolation deck where we
Today, obviously, wave height, ne'er a concern. The weather is beautiful, as Jaden mentioned, in the 60s, sunny. Looking forward to seeing Crew 9 exit the capsule here shortly once they get hoisted onto the recovery vessel Megan.
We can see that recovery vessel slowly but surely closing the distance there between, oh, Dolphin Cam back again. We can see that the Dragon capsule and the recovery vessel, that distance is closing. Again, this is just one more step as we continue to work recovery operations for Dragon Freedom and to the nest located there at the aft end of the recovery vessel.
And the recovery vessel being used today is, as we mentioned multiple times, is named Megan, but that's actually after NASA astronaut Megan McArthur, who flew on Crew 2 a couple of years ago. We're getting some views now from actually inside.
The spacecraft splashed down in salt water. Salt water is corrosive, and we want to try and rinse out as much of the salt water as possible to reduce that corrosion on the metallic structures. So we can see some guidance there being provided, really steering the spacecraft properly into the Dragon's nest.
And it's been 30 minutes since Dragon splashed down, and as you can see there, the spacecraft is already on board the recovery vessel Megan. Things continuing to move very smoothly today throughout the entire operations from the
aerial views during recovery.
All right, Freedom, looks like you are settled into the nest now. Team is working through hypergol sweeps.
Copy all.
Call out there telling us that
to see Dragon
used for initial capsule ingress and final capsule egress, but all comings and goings from the spacecraft while it is on board the space station are from the forward hatch, which is located at the top of the spacecraft under that nose cone. So this is a pretty exciting moment because it will be the crew's first breath of fresh air since boarding their ships at the start of their journeys last year.
And the very first person that will have the opportunity to say hello to the crew once that hatch is open is a SpaceX medical recovery personnel representative. Then we'll see procedures take place to remove to remove the footrests of Dragon. That will just help the recovery personnel get a little bit more room to access the crew and help get them out of the spacecraft.
Yeah, you're absolutely protective equipment there that was brought into frame that will help protect the edge of the side hatch. One, from any potential damage. Oh, we can see the recovery crew member there taking photos of the side hatch seal. This is part of the standard operation for recovery. These photos will get saved into our procedure. We'll then install that protective frame around the side hatch. This helps to ensure that the side hatch itself, the edges of it incur no damage while crew members are coming out from the spacecraft. If you missed it, there was also a recovery team member that went inside. So there are now 5 people on board the Dragon spacecraft.
And if you are just joining us, it has not yet even been an hour since Crew 9 splashed down off the coast of Tallahassee, Florida at 2:57 p.m. Pacific time. The crew is now on board the recovery vessel Megan, and the hatch is open. The next major milestone that we'll see is when the crew will actually egress or exit the spacecraft. But before that, they'll continue to, the recovery personnel rather, will continue to install that protective area around the hatch and then remove the footrests. So we're a couple minutes away from seeing the crew egress, but not too long away.
We'll probably see those footrests being handed out here in the near future, as I mentioned before. Oh, of course, we got to get a well-documented photo of the moment. Although we can't see it from here, I'm pretty sure there are 4 smiles on board right now.
And we did hear that report out from the commander, Nick Hague, following splashdown, that there were four smiles as far as he could see.
Yeah, capsule full of grins. Now, generally speaking,
and there we do see Crew 9, some happy waves, smiles all around back on Earth.
Generally speaking, we have the individuals in the is slid down the little ramp and placed into the mobility aid. Once again, big smile.
Now, the 2 crew members remaining in Dragon are NASA astronauts Sunny Williams and Butch Wilmore. They completed 286 days in space.
One of the remaining footrests being removed from the Dragon spacecraft. As I said before, we generally try to have the crew members that are located in the 2 center seats aboard Dragon, and we like to have them egress first if possible, as it creates a little bit more movable working room inside the spacecraft. There is a recovery crew member inside that is helping all of our